Hi, everyone. Marc again, founder of Atmosphere. Sorry for that improvisation for the last few minutes of the intro, but hopefully I was able to get some important messages across to you. Now we're kicking into our probably our most popular panel, along with the end users panel at our Atmosphere events. And this is the Fgas panel. Yes. This is the panel where we talk about policy, and policy matters, as we all know. It helps create a framework for industry to deliver. So we have a great lineup of experts today. We have until about 11, just 5 minutes past 11. So an hour and a half to really cover this in detail. We have 4 speakers. They will each have about 12 minutes to present their ideas, and then we will take time questions, individual questions. So please use the chat box on the Swapcard app at the bottom right to the window where you're watching this, where you can submit questions, and we'll take those at the end of each presentation, and then we'll have time allowing, we'll have a general Q&A as well. So I just wanted a few words really to kind of kick this off. Kind of mentioned this yesterday in my opening slides, is we've basically got 8 years left. The IPCC report has made it very clear that we're running out of time, clearly running out of time. And if we're going to do anything right, it's this decade. That's basically 8 years. Okay, we don't have 20 years to fix this. We don't have 20 years to find out that these refrigerants or whichever refrigerants are dangerous. We don't have that time anymore. It's done. It's finished. We need to step up the game here. And what's clear, and what we started to see yesterday, and what we're going to see today in more, especially in the panel after, is that there are clear signs. The HFOs, whether they're the pure ones or the blends, they're as dirty as the last generation. They're not the future. And more end users are realizing that. More and more regulators are realizing that. More and more investors are realizing that. And more Gretas of this world, the next generation, will want and expect cleaner cooling solutions. End of story. And they will decide by purchasing decisions. Okay, so there's a high expectation that this decade is really the decade where we need to step up the game and change once and for all, instead of going the same old way of changing one synthetic refrigerant after the other. Okay, there are credible alternatives today, and Europe has led the way when it comes to natural refrigerants. The Fgas regulation is a fantastic success story. It's basically, as a European, I'm proud to say that we've led the way. And the Fgas regulation has kicked off a revolution in the cooling industry. It's really kicked off a revolution. It's spurred massive innovation. There are many examples around Europe of companies that have taken the challenge of the Fgas regulation and gone well beyond that, and are now exporting their innovation and knowledge to the rest of the world. This is a success story. It's created jobs that have a future. And that's what we need. We need clean, future, and jobs. Okay, we need jobs that are around clean cooling solutions. So, but the reality is that if we look at where we are now, and this is a good way, I guess, to introduce Bente. No pressure there, Bente. But we've only just started, meaning that the current Fgas regulation, I look at this and I think this is like a starter. Right, the next Fgas regulation, the one that basically everyone's excited about in the next couple of years, that will set the framework for this decade, is the main course. We got to do the job now. It started, but it's far from complete. So there's a high expectation that this regulation has to be ambitious, and not be overtaken by other policy arenas. Okay, so those are my 2 cents to the challenge for this EU policy panel. So first off, I'd like to welcome Bente. She's spoken a few times before already at Atmosphere Europe. So welcome back. Bente is well known in the industry. She's deputy head of unit in DG Clima that basically handles our sector, whether that's the ozone side or the Fgas side. So she's absolutely crucial to this, our industry. So we're happy that she can join us again before the actual regulation is announced. So we'll be curious to know what the thinking is, what the timelines are, and so forth, if she's able to share any of that information. So Bente, I'd like to welcome you and hand over. Welcome, for those of you who are around the world watching this, please give her a round of applause. It's not the same as being on stage in a real thing, but at least give her a round of applause. Okay, so over to you, Bente.
Thank you very much, Marc. And thank you for that round of applause. I could hear it all the way to Brussels. So that was really nice. I'll start to share my screen. There we go. So I hope you can see it now. And I will try to get this from the beginning. So first of all, thank you very much for the introduction. I can only, agree that the Fgas regulation has already been a huge success. And we are, of course, also looking at making it even better. You can maybe discuss if it was the starter and we are getting to the main course, or if we already had the main course and we will now take the dessert. I also think that depends on if you like salty or more sweet food, but let's not dwell on that. So I will kick off with a little bit a broader picture, talking about the European Green Deal, which was launched by the current commissioners who are in the European Commission. And they have announced already some time ago that we had to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030 and achieve climate neutrality by 2050. And this has now been put into a climate law. So it is no longer just something that we are saying we would like to do. We have committed ourselves in the EU in a law which has already been adopted, that this is what we are going to achieve. And just to say that a few years ago, this was not what we were looking at. There we were looking at only, I would say, because back then we thought that was also ambitious, to go for a -40% target in 2030 and try to reach -80% compared to 1990 in 2050. So we have really stepped up the level of ambition as a response to the many reports we have seen that if we don't do that, we will not be able to do away with the worst effects of climate change. And as we have always done in the past when we have set ourselves targets, we did it in 2020 where we had the so-called 2020 targets. Now we have new 2030 targets and a new 2050 targets. We always take actions to walk the talk. And with the new climate law, we have to walk even faster. So this is why the European Commission has not only first proposed this climate law, which now has already been adopted finally, we are proposing a large number of new rules or revised rules in order to move our emission reductions from -40 to -55 in 2030. And as Marc correctly said, 8 years, it's not a lot of time to do that. It is a serious challenge, which means that business as usual is over. We really need to screw on all the screws we have. I just want to underline that when the Commission is coming out with a proposal, it doesn't mean that it applies the next day. All our proposals always have to be negotiated by the Council, where you have ministers from the 27 member states, and the European Parliament, where you have more than 700 elected politicians. So they first have to agree on the final text. So I can never say exactly when anything will become applicable, but already with the proposal from the Commission, there is, I would say, already a very clear signal what is going to happen. So this is a picture of many of the proposals that we are working on in the Commission right now, or the Commission has already adopted. And I'm showing you this because almost all these proposals have a huge impact on your industry, because it's a lot about increasing energy efficiency and getting more renewables into the energy mix. And since your sector is producing equipment that uses electricity and also is part of getting renewables to the market, this is all these pieces of legislation will be very important for you, because in order to reach the new targets that we have set for energy efficiency and renewables, for renewables, we are going to have at least a 40% share of renewables in the energy mix in 2030. And for energy efficiency, we are looking at reducing the energy use with 36% and 39%, depending on if it is final consumption or if it is primary consumption. This requires a lot of renovation. And that's where also your products, again, are coming in. So this whole package in itself will impact your industry a lot. And then we have new proposals that are in the making, like the Fgas regulation also, which is a part of the puzzle. The question is, what should each sector do? Why do we have an energy efficiency target of 36% for final consumption? Why do we say renewables should be 40% in the energy mix and so on? What we have been doing is we have tried to model all the sectors in the economy to see what can they do and at what cost, in order to make sure that in 2030 we are here basically in the cheapest way, and that we here reach net climate neutrality in 2050 also in the cheapest way. We are trying to do it in a cost efficient way. And as you can see on the blue line, we are not thinking that this will harm growth. On the contrary, we are convinced that with these policies, we have a new growth strategy. So for us, this Green Deal is EU's new growth strategy. And as you can see, this strange color, which is here first, I would call it the salmon color. This is where we have, among other substances, we have Fgases. And you can see they are basically totally disappearing in 2050. And here we are talking about emissions. We are not talking about first use. So if we need to have basically zero emissions from Fgases in 2050, it means that we need to stop using them far before that. So now I'm coming to the Fgas regulation. We have been working on first to evaluate the current regulation to see where it works and where it works less good. And we have come to the conclusion that overall it's actually working pretty well. We have the right type of measures, but we do need to tune it a bit to make it better. And to do that, we have identified actually a very large number of measures, some bigger, some smaller, that can tune and fine-tune the regulation. And for each of these measures, we are assessing what can that bring in climate effects and in other environmental effects, what will be the cost, all the benefits in economic terms, and will it have any social impacts? And we have in this process already made a very, very extensive stakeholder consultation, which kind of ended with our stakeholder conference we had on the 6th of May this year. And now we are here in the process of trying to, I would say, digest all the information and data we have on technologies in order to package the measures in one package, which is the best package. So this is what we are looking for. And coming back to our evaluation and what we found out that we had to do, of course, we found out that we need to align to the new Green Deal climate ambition, because there is no sector in the economy that can just go on business as usual. We must look everywhere. And in order to get more ambition, I mean, our main measures that we already have, that's the phase down and its prohibitions. So we will, of course, then tune these type of measures to get more climate ambition, considering also what are the other sectors requested to do and what can this sector do. And as I always say, we are only looking at alternatives that are considered to be safe and at least as energy efficient as the normal Fgas solutions. Then we also need to streamline with the Montreal Protocol, because the phase down of hydrofluorocarbons under the Montreal Protocol is a little bit different than the one we adopted in advance of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. And for this reason, there is, in particular in the long term, a risk that the EU could be in non-compliance if we are not adapting it a bit. So we are also looking into various changes so that we get a little bit closer to the metric which is used under the Montreal Protocol. Then we are going to also change the rules so that we can implement the regulation better and enforce it better. This has a lot to do with links to customs rules and getting more information that can be used in this future single window for customs, which will automatically check imports with our systems to send a message back if it can be released or not, the good. So we are working on that. We are also trying to, I would say, do away with barriers that have been identified in terms of not having sufficient technicians that can deal with the new alternatives. So we are looking into expanding the request on member states to have training programs and also to ask for skills in that regard when technicians are certified to deal with air conditioning and heat pumps and refrigeration equipment. Then we will improve monitoring and reporting, and we have, of course, found some things that were not clear, learning by doing. So we are also going to do that. I have here put a link which was from the stakeholder conference, where you can see all the different measures that we have been looking at. The fact that they are in this list doesn't mean that they will end up in the final proposal. It just means we are analyzing them to see if it makes sense to make them part of the best option package that we will eventually propose. Then the big question is, of course, when all this will come. And we have, I would say, from day one, worked very hard on this to get it out as quickly as possible, because as we said from the start, we don't have a lot of time. We also want to get a better grip on illegal imports. So we are working as fast as we can. The current time plan is kind of pointing towards an adoption probably around March, April 2022. And then after that, we still need the Council and the European Parliament to adopt it. And that's then a little bit out of my hands, how fast they can do that. But we, of course, hope they will not take too long so that it can start to apply in a not so distant future. At the end, I just want to say that I have here put some additional links which partly can give you information about all the proposals in the Green Deal that will be important for your sector, as well as the link that we have on the update of the Fgas regulation. And if I just may, as a last thing, say that I have received a number of requests for networking, but I'm sorry to say that I won't have time to engage in that. So it's not to be impolite that you're not hearing from me, but I simply will not be able to find the time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bente. Just a couple of questions. One actually that we just got in a live chat, and I'm guessing there'll be more coming, and there'll probably be some more questions for you at the end of the session. But one is given its high relevance for the climate policies, why was the Fgas regulation not included in the Fit for 55 package?
Simply because we were not ready. What we had to do was first to evaluate the current regulation to see what would it bring, and then we had to identify a lot of different measures, go into, I would say, the specificities of all the different sectors that we are covering with the Fgas regulation. I mean, we are not just covering your sector, we are also covering skin cooling that are used for hair removal in beauty centers. So, and SF6 and switchgear, you know, we are really covering many sectors, and there are so many different appliances. And for us to be able to make the type of fine-tuning we need for our policy, we really need to have the facts in place in each single sector that is using the gas. So that's why, you know, it just takes longer to do this. The other proposals, I would say, are a little bit more, you can say, high level, and also they were building on a review that had already been done in the past, very close to the new review, which was aiming for the lower climate targets. So they were, I would say, much further advanced than we were. And it's, I think, a very good principle we have in the Commission with the better regulation, that we are not just, you know, shooting out something without first analyzing in detail if it makes sense and what it's actually going to cost.
Okay, thank you, Bente. Got just a second question popping out. It's quite a long one, so I'll read it out. As an end user, we feel a bit left out of this debate. Consultation is directed at OEMs and sometimes installers. However, end users are using the refrigeration equipment. When leaks occur, end users are losing business, and they are the ones facing the government penalties instead of the installer or manufacturer. Even if there is a full service contract, responsibility is still being pushed on the user, which we perceive as unfair. How will you ensure this balance is restored in the future? That's the question.
Thank you very much. I do understand, I would say, where this question is coming from, because it is clear that when we are looking at, is it possible to replace an HFC in a piece of equipment, we are of course talking to those who are producing it, because they are the ones that know, yes, we can do it or we cannot do it. So our focus is a lot on this group, but when we made our open stakeholder consultation, everybody had the possibility to participate, and everybody who did participate were also invited to the stakeholder conference. So it was already, it was possible to participate, but it's clear when we talk about prohibitions, for instance, in using HFCs in something, we need to have the technical input to find out what is the right thing to do. On top, I would say that when we make our impact assessment is of course focusing on the impact in each single segment of the chain. So there we are also having impact on the end users. We are having, for instance, what does it cost when they have to do leak checks? So it's not that end users are forgotten at all. They are clearly a part of our impact assessment, but it is true that we are, in the design of the measures, we are having a little bit less contact with the end users. And they are also, I would say, not organized in the same, I would say, easy clusters as the manufacturers. Like the manufacturers, they have EPA, for instance, where they are in one group and can attack us. The end users are more dispersed, but we do, for instance, have the food and drink industry that is contacting us as a group. So I think there are some structural issues also that is making it a little bit more difficult for the end users to coordinate the response, but clearly they are not forgotten.
Okay, and this is probably an opportunity for end users like Tom, who asked the question, to maybe get involved in the forthcoming debates that will basically take off next year in 2022, and making sure that the end users are heard more in the conversations, because as Tom says, they're the ones actually buying the equipment. They're the main drivers of all of this change, actually. Okay, and sometimes they go well beyond what the regulators want, like yourself, Bente. So they're key to this, and they're not heard enough, in my opinion. I totally agree with this statement. Got another question. I think we've got time for the other presenters, don't worry. There's one last question, and then I'll put, if we get any more, then we'll put it to the final round, okay? I definitely have one for you, Bente, at the end. But I'll let Menno ask his question. So what is the EU Fgas? Okay, so Menno is basically saying the IPCC report that came out last month, the assessment report number 6, included GWP 20 data, 20-year data. And what is the opinion of the Commission on that? Is this something that you will pay attention to when you look at bans and additional phase downs and some of those refrigerants that will have to disappear from the market? Will you also look at the 20-year, even if right now you're only obliged to look at the 100-year, because 20-year is far more reflective of reality and the time horizons that we're talking about? So is that something that you have even looked at or are looking at or considering?
I mean, we have, of course, noted comments that some would like us to go to the 20-year GWP. What we have on the other side is the Kigali amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which is using the 100 years. And we also have to balance the issue between, making it feasible to implement that. So I would say it's not that we have not considered it, but I think it's not likely that we will shift from 100 to 20 in the new proposal.
Okay, but at least have that in the back of your minds, because end users will, investors will, industry will. They're going to have both side by side, even if the legal one of 100 is there, but they'll still say, what's a 20-year impact? Just out of curiosity. And that will influence the choice, clearly. Is that something that you're going to have in the back of your minds, even if you can't officially say it?
Are you asking me in a big conference to say something that I cannot officially say?
All right, I tried.
I
Okay.
will put it like this, that what we are trying to do is to reduce the use of Hfcs to the extent we can. So, you know, in that sense, it doesn't matter so much what the metric is, as long as this is our goal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, understood. All right, I'll stop putting you on the spot. We've got 2 more questions, but we'll have to put those to the end. Okay. We need. I'd like to thank Bente. Thank you, Bente. So next up, we have Diana from the German Environment Agency, UBA. She is a chemist with a PhD, so she knows a lot about chemicals and refrigerants. She's been a scientist and policy advisor at the UBA for a few years now, and she's presenting some proposals today on how to enhance the Fgas emission reduction. So I'd like to welcome Diana, and it's well worth watching this presentation. Okay,
yeah,
so
thank you very
over to you, Diana.
much. Thank you very much, Marc, for the nice introduction and for the applause, of course. So I would try to give my presentation. So can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So as Marc already told you, I am from a German Environment Agency, and to give a little bit more detail on that, I'm from the section of substance-related product issues. So what should this tell you? So me and my colleagues, we are dealing with ODS and F-gases, and that's why I'm here today. And of course, the legal framework is also interesting for us. And as you already know, the regulations on ODS and F-gases are under review at the moment, and this provides us a very good point in time that we want to use, that we have to use to be more ambitious in the preventing of F-gas emissions. And that's why we have made some proposals. How do we think that could be done in the new regulation? So, but first, let's take a look at the actual figures of F-gas emissions in the EU. So, if you take a look at this picture, you see that since the maximum in 2014, we are now observing decreased F-gas emissions. But if you take a look at the last 3 years, even if we assume that this linear trend will continue till 2030, which is our next target, as Bente already mentioned, 55% below the 1990 level, that means we have to reach 32 million tons CO2 equivalents in 2030 from F-gases, but with assuming a linear trend, from we will only reach 48 million tons CO2 equivalent F-gas emissions, and that means we are 16 million tons over the limit, and therefore we have to be more ambitious, as I already said. So what what happened in the last years. You can see on that slide. I think you already know this picture. The EAA published this every year, the progress of the phase down so far. So we are on track with reducing the consumption of or placing on the market, as it is called, of HFCs in that. But as you also see on this picture, there are some exemptions in the current Fgas regulation. And if you put that also on this picture, you see this orange shadowed bar here for the exempted uses. So there are 21 million tons in CO2 equivalents per year that are used in the EU for these exempted uses. And for sure, there are also occurring emissions of HFCs, especially the 10 million tons of CO2 equivalents that are used every year in pharmaceutical MDIs, as can be assumed that they are totally emitted because of this application. So what do we believe what should have what should be done in the new regulation? Though our the first part of our proposal is for sure to accelerate the phase down of the HFCs in the EU. So we propose to start with new steps, or with deeper steps, even in 2024. So we propose to go down to 25% instead of currently 32%, and to 15% in 2027 instead of 24% that we have now in the current Fgas regulation. And our final level of proposal for the final level is 10% of the baseline, compared to 25% as we have now. And by doing, or by implementing such an accelerated phase down, we could save additional 100 million tons of CO2 equivalents in consumption by 2030. So that's a cumulative number. And from 2031 on, each year 20 million tons of CO2 equivalent could be saved compared with the current HFC phase down scheme. So we really should be ambitious and start early, and not in 2029. We should start in 2024 to save as much HFCs, or to avoid as much as HFCs use. Yeah. So the second part of our proposal is to improve, or to improve some existing bans, and also to introduce new prohibitions, as we have seen in the last years that these prohibitions are a very clear signal to the market, and they really helps to make this HFC phase down a success, because they are so clear, and industry, the target industry, the target applications are clear, and they know what to do. There's a timeline, there's a limit, and that's why I think these are very useful tools, and they should be used also in the new regulation. So our proposal is to set down the GWP limit for the single split air conditioners to 150. And the reason for that is that we have seen in the last year a very large growing market in this sector. So there are many new applications entering the market. And if we don't go deeper with the GWP, the achievements in just going to 700 in GWP will be will be just covered by those more applications. So there will be no effect in the end. And the second one is to also lower the GWP limit for stationary refrigeration. And there we have a very high limit of 2,500. I'm very sorry, 2,500 at the moment. But we now have a broad range of alternatives in the market, so that this limit could be significantly lowered to also achieve much more HFC reduction in that applications. And the second one is a new prohibition we are proposing, and this is covering heat pumps. Heat pumps are also a growing sector because they are needed in terms of the decarbonization of heating of buildings. So it's a key technology, and they have to be a growing sector, as you could imagine. But by doing so, we have to keep in mind that they are also using refrigerants, and often using refrigerants at the moment with higher GWP. And that's why there should be a ban also, because there are alternatives available. Some further measures could be, as I also already mentioned, are the deletion of these exemptions for these MDIs from the phase down, so that the exempted uses are also covered by the phase down. And other measures could be to enhance training and certification to avoid leakages and so on, and also to revise the annexes of because there are new substances that could be covered, and that is worth it to take a look on. So, and what we have also want to spot the light on are the other F-gases. The most of the regulation now is dealing with HFCs, because their emissions are the highest part now of the F-gases, as you have seen on my first slide. But the other F-gases are responsible for emissions as well. And as you see on this picture, after a decrease since 2009, they remain on a very constant level of 11 million tons CO2 equivalents per year. And that means that the current F-gas regulation had no effect on these substances or on the emissions of these substances at all. And that has to be changed for sure. Because as you know, SF6 is a very potent greenhouse gas with a very, very high GWP, the highest we know. And there are now also alternatives available for some applications. So there could be measures also on these substances. And for example, especially on SF6, there could be a ban for switchgear, for example. So these gases needs to be more reflected in the new F-gas regulation than it is today. So this was a very short overview of our proposal and on our evaluation to come to this proposal. So if you want to get more details, you can download our scientific opinion paper from the website. I've put the link in here. So you are welcome to download it, to read through it, and get a better impression of our evaluation and our proposal. And for sure, you are welcome to get back with questions to me and to us. And for now, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to receive questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Some questions for you. Some are also more general, but there's one particular one that I think would be from the Belgian government. Actually, there's a representative from Belgium which participating today, Alain, and he's asking, is the current threshold of 150 GWP still realistic, or could it be more lowered to reflect latest technology developments? So he's basically saying, can you go lower than 150?
I have a question back to which application is meant with this GWP limit of 150. So
I'll let Alain reply to that one if he's specific about specific applications. But you were talking on your slide deck about single split air conditioners. You were talking about stationary refrigeration and heat pumps specifically. So I assume he refers to those.
So, okay. So as I've told you, we have evaluated the market situation and try to figure out what alternatives are at the market now. Are there alternatives for all applications? So, for example, if you talk about stationary refrigeration, that's not one application. That's a lot of applications that come to this sector, to this group, to say. So we have to really evaluate the whole scope of stationary refrigeration, for example, and if there is for every application an alternative, and we try to do this, and that's why we've come to this GWP limit. So as I told you, you can find more details in the report we've written. So it's a complex thing, I would say.
Okay.
So
I mean,
there are applications that you can go much deeper with natural refrigerants for sure, but that's not for every single case. It's not possible.
Okay. There's lots of questions. I'll field one more and then we'll go at the end. So pay attention till the end, please, Diana. This next one is, what about the Fgas 40 kilowatt limit that we have for stationary refrigeration right now? Are you saying get rid of that and it's just all stationary regardless of size and apply 150 GWP?
This is linked to this ban on refrigeration equipment, I would say. So this is an option that is in these documents from the consultants of the commission. So we think this could be possible to enlarge the scope there to cover more more applications there with also with lower capacities and also with other refrigerants for sure in the future.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Diana. Okay. So round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and please stay on the panel. Don't leave the stage yet. So then next up, we have Clare Perry from EIA, the Environmental Investigation Agency. So she's well known in Brussels and beyond. She's probably the most famous representative of the NGO community in our space, I would say. So she's a climate campaign leader based in Europe, and has a wealth of knowledge around this sector and has been involved in this sector for many, many years. Please give her a round of applause, and over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Marc, and good morning, everyone. I will share my screen and hope that I can cope with the technology. Can you see that now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, just first of all, just a little introduction to EIA for those that don't know us. We are a non-profit, non-governmental organisation based in the UK, and we have 4 programme areas: climate, forests, oceans and wildlife. And our climate campaign is very focused on HFCs and other short-lived climate super pollutants, all the precursors, CFCs and so on, as well as methane. We have been involved in this business for some time. I think I actually began working on HFCs about 15 years ago when the first Fgas regulation was implemented. I wasn't actually involved in that, but I noticed the first slide of Diana's presentation. It was interesting to see, if I understood it correctly, that HFC emissions are still somewhat higher than they were in 2006 when we had the first Fgas regulation. So we do have a lot of work to do with this new review. We are since the last review, which we were involved in, we've been supporting implementation and enforcement of the regulation. We work with a coalition of 10 NGOs across Europe. You can see all their logos there. And we also share information on the availability of HFC-free cooling. We have a website called cooltechnologies.org, which is a database of sustainable cooling, and we recently published a product list of cooling products that are compatible with the pathway to net zero. So those are all available from our website. There's sort of 3 things in the back of our mind when we're looking at this Fgas review. And the first is single split residential air conditioning. This is obviously a huge issue. We've heard about this already today. The Commission has said it's technically possible to avoid HFCs under a cooling capacity of 7 kilowatts. We've identified several of these products coming to market finally, and we're expecting new standards under the IEC at the beginning of next year, maybe, to be voted on. So we do see this review as a huge opportunity to ban F-gases in the sector and send a message to the rest of the world, because this is going to be a huge chunk of HFCs that we can avoid. The second, again, already mentioned, the second sort of issue of context that we have are heat pumps and avoiding unintended consequences. Heat pumps are absolutely critical in the race to decarbonize the heating sector. But as we know, many rely on HFCs, and we need to ensure that in our efforts to bring heat pumps to the market, we don't undermine the F-gas regulation. So again, strong signal from the F-gas regulation there will really help that. And finally, as I said, we've been working on implementation. We do have issues with the legal trade in the EU of HFCs. We published a report a couple of months ago, which detailed some investigations we've done into the HFC illegal trade, where we identified Romania as a key entry point for illegal HFCs, coming primarily from Turkey and the Ukraine. Based on a variety of different measures, we believe that the illegal trade is significant, as much as 20 to 30% of the legal trade in the last few years, 2018, 19, 20. But we do think that the F-gas review can do a lot about this and can do a lot to help enforcement officials crack down on this trade. So our key demands are based around strengthening ambition, promoting uptake of HFC-free alternatives, and promoting compliance. So in terms of strengthening ambition, some of the things you've heard in the last presentation, we want to see the phase down accelerated in line with what is required for meeting the 1.5 degree scenario. We think we can strengthen the existing Annex 3 bans removing exemptions, bringing the GWP level down, but also adding new ones. Essentially, wherever HFCs can technically be avoided, we should be avoiding them. So sectors like condensing units, all stationary refrigeration, as previously mentioned. We need to put those bans in Annex 3 because they also help ensure compliance. It's much easier to implement than through just the phase down. But we'd like to see a few novel measures as well. And one of those is banning the use of 404A and other very high GWP HFCs. They are just not necessary anymore. We still have HFC 23 being put into new refrigeration equipment for low temperature refrigeration equipment. We have seen through our investigations, we've seen a strong demand for illegal HFC 404A. And so this may be coming from the smaller refrigeration equipment that's not covered by the current servicing ban, or it might be that the current servicing ban has not been implemented fully. But the reality is, even if HFC 404A is recycled, it's still very bad when it gets into the environment, and we do not need to perpetuate the use of this through to 2030 as the current rules are. So we would like to see a ban on 404A, and if we can look at some of the other very high GWP HFCs and do the same, that would be very good. As mentioned, as asked by Alan just recently, we certainly do think 150 is no longer low enough. If you look at over the years, over a 10-year, 20-year period, the difference between 150 and 15, for example, is huge. We know from the IPCC that we're probably going to hit 1.5 this century, whatever, but every single ton of CO2 equivalent avoided will make a difference to the impact on our world. So we do think GWP limits should be reduced to the lowest possible level in every single sector that we can do it, and subsector. And finally, to further reduce emissions of HFCs, we need producer responsibility schemes meeting some minimum requirements. Then in terms of promoting the uptake of HFC-free alternatives and technologies, we'd like to see a quota allocation fee or an auction of HFCs quotas to reduce the number, to make it harder to deal with these HFCs. As mentioned before, mandatory competence on natural refrigerants is absolutely critical to enable the uptake of these refrigerants. And we'd like to see more incentive schemes and public procurement for HFC-free alternatives. The single split residential AC units with propane have been available for many years, and we're only just seeing them come to the European market. We still need to really boost the uptake of these technologies, and I think that public procurement could be really, really helpful with that. And as mentioned, standards still need to be updated, and as soon as possible. And so then finally, in terms of promoting compliance, this is something that the Fgas regulation can make a huge difference. We still need additional enforcement action on the ground, cooperation between customs and more capacity, but they need to have their job made easier. And so some of the things that we can do to do that, having a real-time HFC licensing system through the single window, absolutely critical, but we do need to include HFCs in transit. We have identified transit, as have others, identified transit, T1 transit, as a major route for HFC smuggling. So we need more controls over transit. We would also recommend a separate bulk import quota system to better monitor and control the import of HFCs into the EU. For example, we've been seeing the kind of trade discrepancies we've seen when we're looking at the trade data is there's Turkey exports into the EU are being recorded as 4 times higher than European imports from Turkey. So we need to really crack down on the import of HFCs. The additional controls on HFCs in transit could be limited customs points where it's allowed, registering T1, transit consignees and so on. We'd also like to see better traceability of HFCs through the supply chain, better certification and record keeping. People need to be able to trace back where the HFCs have come from and know that they're not illegal. Removing exemptions and thresholds, for example, the 100-ton CO2 equivalent threshold for the HFC phase down. We need EU-wide minimum penalties, so we can really crack down on the smugglers that are perpetuating this trade. We'd like to see the HFC 23 obligation strengthened. We do not believe that this is being implemented right now. We have an all-time high levels of HFC 23 in the atmosphere, despite the billions we've poured into trying to address this issue. And Article 7 of the Fgas regulation was put in there to try and help ensure that any HFCs coming into the EU, that any HFC 23 had been destroyed that was linked to that HFC, be it in the feedstock or whatever. Clearly, this is not happening, and we need to really strengthen the obligation and look at other potential sources of HFC 23. And finally, banning the use of disposable cylinders. This is something we want to see. All of these measures, really, we want to see worldwide. So we're looking for the EU to have this gold standard Fgas regulation, which will help the rest of the world implement effectively and efficiently the Kigali Amendment when it kicks in for them, which is coming very soon, of course. And I think that's it. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Claire. Just waiting for people to submit some questions directly to you. There are some really good general questions that I know you will enjoy answering, but we can do that after. I have one comment to the illegal trade issue. It's an easy fix. Just go to natural refrigerants, then they won't make money from illegal refrigerants. It's that simple. Game over. No more illegal trade. Go to natural refrigerants. That simple, easy fix, anywhere in the world. So hopefully that message will be heard more often in the coming debate. All right, I have a question. Yes, from Alexander, or Alex, as we all know him. Thank you, Claire, for good presentation. In the past, there was talking about R23 as a byproduct from production of HFCs. In your opinion, does that apply to HFOs as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think, you know, I'm not a chemist. I managed to do A-level chemistry, but it's very clear that all of these chemicals, you know, I've often spoken, in fact, I'm amazed they didn't say it in the presentation, but I've often spoken about the chemical treadmill, and the fact that we seem to leap from one to the other, which initially might look like it's better, but tends to have some other impacts that we were not aware of at the time. And we've been very concerned about HFOs for a very long time, initially mostly because of the TFA breakdown issue. But obviously there's this new science paper now which is linking HFC 23 emissions to the breakdown of HFOs. And that could explain why we have all-time high HFC 23 emissions. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to other HFCs as well. So, you know, for example, the production of HCl CFC 22, which is where the 23 comes from that we know about, is an intermediate step in the production of HFC 32. So it's possible that these 23 emissions are coming from HFC 32 production, as well as HFOs degrading in the atmosphere. We need to do, urgently do a lot more monitoring and research into this. But again, going back to what you said, Marc, the solution is obviously to avoid these refrigerants and to go to natural refrigerants that have been around a very long time, and we know about them, and they have not come with those problems.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. All right, we've got 25 minutes to go, so I'd like to give our final speaker a chance to present, and then we'll have a general Q&A. So next up, we have Owen Lennon from Novum, Director of Innovation. He's been in the industry several decades now, and in particular has been working more recently with Novum on the propane side of things, and for commercial refrigeration. And Novum is a member of the Clean Cooling Coalition, which is a new coalition that was created to represent industry that actually wants to do something about the Fgas regulation, right? EPI does not represent industry. There's a big chunk of the industry that is not represented by EPI, just to be clear. And a bunch of companies have got together and said, enough is enough. We want more ambition. So over to you, Owen.
Okay, thank you very much, Marc, for the nice introduction. I'll jump in and start sharing my presentation here. Can you all see that? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
So as Marc said, my name's Owen Lennon. I'm from Novum. I'm the Director of Innovation, and I'm here today to represent the Clean Cooling Coalition. So first of all, who are the Clean Cooling Coalition? Well, we're a group of progressive European companies in the HVAC and our industry who firmly believe that the most effective way for the EU to achieve its carbon neutrality by 2050 lies in the quick reduction of Fgas usage and scaling up of natural refrigerant solutions. So there's quite a few companies in it. We're all in different sectors of the industry, representing different natural refrigerants and different technologies. TECO, Efficient Energy, Dorn Innovation, Novum, that's us, Mirai, Reftronics, Product Blocks, GEA, and Checo. And we all represent different sectors, different refrigerants, air, CO2, water, H2O, and ourselves here with hydrocarbons. And there's others here representing electronics and compressor usage for the natural refrigerant industries. So with that, I'll just do a little bit on Novum in particular. That's what I know about. We're an OEM manufacturer of self-contained retail display cases for the food retail sector. We transitioned to hydrocarbon refrigerants, natural refrigerants, 5 or 6 years ago, and supply nothing but hydrocarbon solutions. And we have focused on trying to make those as highly efficient and easy to adopt for the retailers as is possible. We developed a unique patented system using cassettes to reduce the maintenance issues around propane. We've made their solutions efficient, quick, and easy to install with low maintenance. So it's now economical and easy for the retailers to adopt natural refrigerants very quickly and easily, change out all those old, leaky, inefficient HFC systems that they may have in their fleets, and move on. So that's it. Move on So, what are our aims with the Clean Cooling Coalition? First of all, we'd like to see a more ambitious adoption of bans, and outdated exemptions should be done away with. With the Green New Deal requirement for carbon neutrality, it is clear that we need to accelerate the phase down of HFCs and Fgases, and we need more ambitious HFC bans for all the HVAC in our sector that haven't been, and some of the exemptions that have been in the current regulations need to be addressed as well going forward with the new regulations. So our recommendation: new bans for sectors where energy efficient solutions are commercially viable from January 2024, i.e. as soon as possible. Bans for sectors in which energy efficient solutions are currently available but lack the generated volume demand as such as air conditioning and heat pumps, which have been emphasized by several of the previous speakers. And we think that should be adopted by at least 2025. And there are two exemptions that are no longer necessary in the industry as well. One for the ultra low temp sector, -50 and below, and transport refrigeration. We think these bans should be, or these exemptions should be eliminated from the next Fgas regulations. Taxes, incentives, and training for alternatives. The current mandatory training and certification for the HV and HR equipment under the Fgas regulation addresses only the Fgases and doesn't consider the safe handling of their replacements or natural refrigerant solutions such as CO2, ammonia, hydrocarbon, and water and air. So we believe there should be more training provided, and it should be incorporated into the Fgas training. Our recommendations for this: first of all, although taxes are a member state prerogative, we believe that the EU can help sharing the knowledge and coordinating member states in terms of best practice for HFC taxes, and keeping in mind the EU's EU polluter pays principle. In addition, the member states can share best practices on incentives and alternatives like natural refrigerants, which can help offset the upfront costs with some of the technologies. And once price parity has been achieved, these can be phased down. Extend the existing certification to include compulsory training on toxic, flammable, and high pressure refrigerants. So there are our main recommendations for taxes, incentives, and training. Oh, forgot one. The Commission should create public awareness through a campaign to inform the public and industry on the Fgases and their issues and the alternatives that are available, particularly the natural refrigerant alternatives. This would greatly help the transition, we believe. Then moving on to our recommendation on GWP, we believe a limit of 50 GWP is viable and should be adopted. The EU Commission proprietary study and the Commission impact assessment concluded that the transition to safe and efficient alternatives relying on natural refrigerants and low GWP technologies will be available and both cost-effective and feasible in most sectors by 2020. I think this is well achieved already, and there is no real reason not to adopt a 50 GWP limit going forward. that's our recommendation, to adopt a GWP of 50 for all sectors. This allows the faster transition to low GWP refrigerants. But looking at solely the 100-year GWP figure on its own is a very limited view. The Commission needs to take into account all aspects, from the manufacturing, distribution, and the elimination of HFCs and Fgases. And there's a lot more implications for health and safety than just GWP. Looking at that one figure over 100-year impact is short-sighted in our opinion. And considering the EU's climate goals for the next 30 years, looking at a 100-year figure doesn't make sense. The 20-year GWP figure makes much more sense and is more aligned with the EU's carbon goals. So we'd recommend that the 20-year GWP, or the real GWP, needs to be added maybe alongside the existing 100-year figure in most assessments, to see and calculate the real impact of these refrigerants. It's necessary for the policymakers and the public to understand the urgency of the Fgases, and this must be looked at as well. Considering that the EU's climate target goal is now legal for 2050, it makes more sense to have a GWP figure that is more closely matched to this timeline. So HFOs, they require deeper evaluation, as several of the previous speakers have already mentioned. There's a lot of implications around these blends and HFOs and the way they break down in the atmosphere, and possible implications and causes from that. So that needs to be addressed going forward and should be included in the restricted intention under the EU's REACH regulation. The recommendations, we strongly recommend caution against the use of synthetic HFOs and refrigerants or blends, as their impact on the environment and human health is still being studied, and more study is required on those. The EU precautionary principle needs to be applied when examining the HFOs, especially in light of most recent research findings. And additionally, when assessing these substances, no data, no market approach principle should be considered, alongside the do no harm principle as well. So we would urge for the health and safety studies of HFOs to be carried out by the Commission urgently in conjunction with the ECHA. So the key messages from the Clean Cooling Coalition for the industry will be: we want an ambitious phase out is required. Exemptions that are in place should be lifted, and support for the uptake of alternative refrigerants should be put in place. And a holistic analysis of fluorinated gases is required as well. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
Thank you, Owen. We'll wait for people to comment or raise questions. In the meantime, we've got 10 minutes left, and we've got some questions that maybe we need to get out there. I'm going through the chat that you can all see. There's lots of questions about HFOs, and I guess we can start off by saying, there will be a whole panel about this next. So stay and watch the next panel as well, where you'll get much more detail about the consequences of HFOs. But maybe a question directed to the Commission to start with, and then possibly to UBA as well. And where is that question? Dum-dum-dum-dum. I had it in front of me and it's gone. Oh yeah. Yeah, for the European Commission, the next Fgas regulation, will you just keep considering just the GWP values, or will you look at other effects on the environment and health that can't be ignored anymore? I added that bit. So maybe you want to go for that one, Bente, and then over to Diana.
Yes, I mean, whenever we are analyzing our options, we are always taking into account all environmental and health effects in our impact assessment. So we are looking at these effects, but of course the purpose of this regulation that I am in charge of is to, in the first instance, reduce the climate impact. And then if that would lead to issues in other areas, we are going to take that into account. But as regards the potential impacts on HFOs, that is mainly dealt with under the REACH regulation. And that's also where they have the expertise. As Clare, I'm not a chemist, so it's better that these issues are dealt with, I would say, where they belong, and then the policies will have to complement each other.
So if REACH, and a lot of us know about what's going on, but we'll hear more about that shortly. If REACH bans HFOs, does that mean that they go from the Fgas market?
Well, if there is a ban, then, I mean, an Fgas regulation cannot undo that ban, but we are not at all there yet. But this is, you know, the principle with the legislation that we are making, that one piece of legislation cannot override another one. So we had a similar issue recently where something was still allowed under a health piece of legislation linked to pesticides, but it was banned under our regulation. And then, of course, that prevails. This is kind of the principle legally.
Not quite sure I understood. You're saying that if REACH bans HFOs, but Fgas allows them, there might be a conflict there?
No, because if there is a ban somewhere, then that ban applies.
Okay.
Okay,
So just want to make sure I understood.
Banning everything which is banned in the European Union.
Okay, it's clear.
We are looking at the climate impacts.
Okay. Diana, do you want to give a try to that question about thinking beyond just the very closed vision of 100-year, which is basically not relevant? And then, you know, what about the other stuff? Are you looking at that?
Yeah,
UBA?
for sure. Yeah. We are also for sure aware of these new scientific findings of this byproduct, and maybe the impact of R22 in the atmosphere. And for sure we are also aware of these shorter breakdown times and the GW20 values that might be better to get an impression of the climate impact of these substances, because they are shorter, they have shorter lifetimes. And as you already mentioned, and as many of you maybe know, we are also have research projects, and we are focusing on HFOs for sure, and for TFA as a degradation product. And in the next session, as you already mentioned, Mr. Behringer from Öko-Recherche will present some of our latest findings on that issue. So we are very focused on these aspects, and we are not seeing HFOs as the solution for HFCs.
Okay, thank you. In the meantime, another question to the Commission for the next Fgas regulation. Will that refer to the new IPCC values for refrigerants that have been updated? Because like R32 went up, no surprise, and some other HFCs and whatever they're called now went up too. So are you going to reflect those latest numbers in, are you going to refer to the latest assessment report 6 from the IPCC in your future regulation?
When it comes to the phase down, which concerns the imports and production and exports and so on, we will, I think, use the same values that are used under the Montreal Protocol.
That's out of date.
Yeah, but if we are not using the same as the Montreal Protocol, it will be, to say it, a total mess when we have to report to the Montreal Protocol for our phase down. The Montreal Protocol may then adopt a new report, and then we will adjust to that.
That's going to take years.
Yeah, but it's very difficult to use 2 different sets of values when we are covered by the Montreal Protocol on the import, production, and export. But when it comes to reporting emissions, which is not actually covered by our regulation, but which is covered by a holistic regulation in the EU, where you have all the greenhouse gas emissions, there, an update to a different report may happen, but that will depend on the UNFCCC, what they are requesting for their reporting. So I would say we are trying to follow the metric to which we are to which we have to feed in.
Yeah, but okay, this goes back to leadership. There's a comment there where a bit provocative, but I'll read it out. What is more important, updated scientific knowledge or our protocols?
Well, it's not like a choice between one or the other. First of all, what we are trying to do is to avoid the use of HFCs. So it doesn't really matter if there is maybe, I would say, a number of 20 difference in a DWP of a gas. If we agree that this is our first goal.
Well, that matters if it means it's banned or not. It does matter.
It matters if it is banned or not. That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
But in general, and I know where you are coming from there, but that's a different issue. But okay.
Bente, I'm going to stop you on this because I've got 1 minute left and I want to ask one really important question. Sorry. When is it coming out?
The proposal?
Yes. Is it November, December, January, or February? Which one?
I think it's March, April.
Oh.
That's, I think, the most likely time period. And that is the quickest we can do. So it's not
March, April.
Yeah, it's not a matter of, I would say.
And you think that's realistic to have it all decided before summer 2023?
This I cannot,
answer that.
answer, maybe you should ask Belgium instead.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get cut off in precisely 5 seconds. So thank you, everyone. Always entertaining panel. I'm sorry we couldn't get more questions to you, but you got a sad face from Belgium, by the way, Bente, there, just as a reaction to that Belgium decide. So March, April is not making people happy. Just a message there to you, Bente. All right. All right, thank you everyone, and coffee break, and then see you in 10 minutes for the